We began to be aware about this second great uncle when a prayer book that my late mother had in her keeping came to light. This started my daughter's further extensive research into just who the family were and their details. Vincent's mum and dad were Edward and Bertha Hammond, both born in Knighton, Radnorshire, Wales. They adopted their nephew, William Hammond, who was my grandfather, as a small child in 1885. Then Vincent came along in 1892. Edward Hammond was a tailor, as his father was before him, and he taught his trade to William Hammond. This photograph shows the school Vincent attended, which was Knighton National Primary School. This prayer book was presented to him by Mr. Smythe, who was the school's headmaster. The family shop in Broad Street in Knighton had some fire damage from the blaze from the shop next door on December the 6th, 1911. This photograph taken this year shows the shop is still in existence today. We know that Vincent had a motorcycle, and we found out that his friends who also had motorcycles were involved in an accident from old newspaper cuttings, which also mention Vincent was on the local jury. He not only worked with his father, who was a master tailor, but the bespoke garments made were delivered on his motorcycle. We know he was involved in the local fitness club and also in the drama group, and like his adopted brother William, joined the Hereford Territorial Force. Edward and Bertha Hammond donated the processional cross to Knighton's St. Edward's Church in the memory of their beloved son. It's still in use 100 years later. Vincent's family carried the cross when they were in the choir 70 years after his death. Knighton has changed little over the years. The family moved to Rose Hill, and the tailor's shop is also still there, but like many other families caught up in this dreadful conflict, who also suffered heartache. It may be 100 years ago, but losses like these were difficult to live with at any time. But the loss of an earner in the family in some cases had greater effects than others.
When war broke out, we, as territorials, were called to arms. Our duties were wide and varied, from manning recruitment stations, parading and generally showing the flag. When we collected the volunteers, they were mustered at collection centres and marched to the battalion depots, where they were fed and kitted out prior to the start of their basic training. I was disappointed when I was seconded from my Hereford Regiment to the King's Shropshire Regiment. After basic training, marching, drilling, the basic skills of a soldier, they progressed on to the next phase of their training. The Earl of Lonsdale sponsored the 11th Battalion of the Borderers, and I was posted to them. The headquarters were in Carlisle, once again having to settle in and make new pals. We moved to the training camp at Carlisle Racecourse, then on to Press Heath for combat training. When completed, we were attached to the 97th Brigade of the Borderers. The combat training was intense, working from first light until early evening, when it was back to the tents. Route marches were long and hard, and of course the commanding officer liked his formal parades. Then, after all this combat training, we marched to Carlisle Station, where we boarded a troop train for Folkestone. When we arrived at the dock, we boarded the troop ship and joined other regiments for the trip to Boulogne. I now felt we were at war. The date was the 23rd of November 1915. In one large column, our battalion marched inland to our designated regrouping area. I really felt we were ready for combat. Little did I know what was in front of us. We felt confident, and being in France added to our spirits. My pals all felt the same. Our commanding officer gathered us together to describe our initial and future role in the weeks ahead. He also explained the trench system we'll be fighting in. We of course already had been trained in trench warfare, but he also added, as a new battalion, we were told we had a lot to achieve, and he was confident we would do this. In our stand easy time, some of us attended a church service. Then the battalion marched off. These lorries were delivering our ammunition and supplies to our regimental base camp. I found the work hard and the conditions very primitive. We were kept very busy and we were pushed to our limits as far as stamina was concerned. At that moment in time, being a soldier was hard work. As this area was a temporary camp, it was very rough and ready. We had to improvise as far as sleeping shelters were concerned. We had to scrounge, beg, borrow or acquire materials for our tents or shelters. It is amazing what can be done to make something out of nothing, but we all managed, some better than others. The cookhouse produced the meals, and we took turns in collecting the dixies of food and issued it out to our platoon. The boys helped themselves to the tea dixies. After our meal and a brew, it was time for a bit of banter and chat, as during the day there was never enough time for that. At Stand Easy we relaxed, wrote or read any letters from home, as well as brewing up. We got our gear ready before marching off. Off again, moving nearer to the front line trenches, with the sound of gunfire in the distance. This is what we were trained for, I hope. We were issued and fitted these barbed wire cutters to the muzzles of our rifles. The original plan by their generals had been to advance 4,000 yards across the Picardy fields and push the enemy out of their entrenched positions. Once this had been achieved, they then can be pursued across the empty, undefended ground to the rear. This was the largest British army that had been sent into battle in all its history, and everyone a volunteer. The front line was to extend along a 15-mile front. The reality of it all was to prove a shock. On the first day of the battle, Withering German machine gun fire mowed down the advancing British troops with such precision that thousands died in the first 15 minutes of the battle. By nightfall on the end of the first day, no substantial gain into German-held positions had been made. The casualties had been horrific. 60,000 men had been killed or wounded in a matter of hours. The phrase, "lions led by donkeys," had been coined. We advanced forward and recaptured a frontline position to mop up and clear up any enemy left in the trench, as well as any dead or wounded. I do not know just what kept me going. I think it was self-preservation and, of course, teamwork. Then the gruesome work of gathering the dead of both armies. At last we were relieved and returned to the village behind the lines for a 48 hours respite. On reassembly, 40 of our battalion were selected to assist the Highland Light Infantry in an attempt to rescue 120 men surrounded at Redan Ridge.
Lyn, my daughter, found that Vincent was involved in the attack in Redan Ridge on the 16th of November 1916. She traced him through books, the internet and battalion records. He was selected from his division, one of 40 experienced soldiers. This group joined men from the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry and the Highland Light Infantry, who were involved in the last attack on the ridge. They had over 120 of their men trapped in the Frankfurt Trench up on Redan Ridge. These troops were running short of ammunition, food, and the wounded in desperate need of attention. The weather was terrible, with rain, wind, snow, and mud underfoot. The attack was successfully pressed forward, and the wounded were evacuated. The enemy kept up a continuous barrage, but had not pushed forward a counter-attack. A decision was taken to retreat and regroup. Vinnie and the borderers were in a very strong position in the trench system, so they were left to cover the retreat. Later the group were overrun by the enemy. No one survived. They are all buried together in this cemetery, comrades together. That was the 18th of November, 1916. The hymn book that started our curiosity into Vincent's story was placed on his grave by my daughter Lyn when she visited the war graves. I hope you enjoyed this film. It was made so future generations of our family can understand the sacrifices these young courageous men, Winter and Vincent, made for us all.